Hey, this is the Last Coffee House. I hope my chair noise didn't just get in there because I slid on over into the intro. I just wanted to rant a little bit about the Gillette ad. I've seen some very good responses and criticisms of this ad, but it has some fundamentally philosophically curious things about it. Number one, it's strange that any negative attribute that you'd attribute to, or negative characteristic that you want to attribute to a woman, it would be called a dangerous stereotype. But a negative attribute that you want to attribute to a man, you can call it toxic masculinity. The ad in particular used a whole bunch of you could call a stereotype that you would say that, men grilling, or that men fighting each other, men going after women in aggressive ways, or not even in aggressive ways, just attempting to talk to one. That was, oh my gosh. And the talk isn't that, okay, well, these are stereotypes about men, so therefore stop stereotyping men, and that's the end of that. That would be the proper PC way to approach it. Those are stereotypes, and stop stereotyping. But no, it's considered, yes, these are attributes of men, and they need to be criticized, and all men need to be held responsible for it. It's such a curious dichotomy. So if you were to say something like, women are overly emotional, and call that you could, on the one hand, call that a stereotype and say that, well, not all, or it's just a stereotype, women aren't over emotional. Or you could say that it's a stereotype, some women are overly emotional, but not all women are overly emotional. Or you could break it down into this percentage of women are overly emotional. So it's okay to say that this percentage of women are overly emotional, while this percentage of women are not, because we've done the research. Same thing goes for men. You could say that men are overly aggressive. Wait, that's a stereotype. Men are not overly aggressive. Wait, that's a stereotype. Some men are overly aggressive, but not all men are overly aggressive. Wait, you can say that this percentage of men, because we've done the research, are overly aggressive, but this percentage of men are not overly aggressive. And there has to be some kind of philosophical underpinnings to all this stuff that's going on. And that's my fundamental problem. If they're going to make an argument, okay, make an argument. But this is my fundamental problem with this issue, is that it's not even internally consistent. If it's internally consistent, then okay, we can run with it and then we can argue back and forth about it. But that's why it's so dangerous, that it's so stupid. It's so religiously based that it's just dogmatically, these are the ideologies that we're pushing forward. It doesn't matter if it makes sense, doesn't matter if it makes sense with itself. It's internally, it doesn't contradict something else within its own internals. It doesn't matter. It's an ideology. We need to follow it dogmatically and get emotional if somebody calls it into question. Now, Gillette, obviously, none of these companies, what other company? There's another shaving company that had something like this that they promptly took down after this Gillette stuff, but none of these companies actually care about any of this stuff. They really don't. They just want to make money. They think they're getting on a bandwagon because the media overrepresents the extremes of social justice. And so they try to get on this bandwagon to get some clicks, get some money, get some purchases, get their name out there. That's all they're doing. And none of these companies actually care about any of this stuff. Same with Star Wars and Disney and all that other nonsense. They don't actually care about any of this stuff that they're peddling about making a representation and forces female and all that nonsense. They're just trying to make a bunch of money. That's what they're trying to do. So it's really frustrating to see this. But like I said, it just doesn't make any sense. So are we going to say that, okay, these things are stereotypes and therefore you can't just slather this on to a whole gender? Same with women. You can't just slather it on. Whatever stereotype about women, you can't just put it on there. Same with men. You can't just say they're overly aggressive because they're men. That's a stereotype. And so you can't do that. Or are we saying that we're going to acknowledge that there are biological distinctions and biological inclinations and disinclinations that people have, that are fractionally more common within one gender versus the other, and just say, yeah, that's the case. Let's not hold it against somebody until they act as an individual. How about we do that? There's so much rationalization and just lying to ourselves and all this nonsense. If we could it starts 100% with speech. It absolutely starts with the ability to be able to talk about this stuff without being crucified. It's absolutely ridiculous. You have to be able to talk about this stuff honestly and genuinely. Just imagine if, like when Steven Pinker talked about the differences in the bell curves, the IQ bell curves for men and women, and the reason those differences in the IQ bell curves explain where men and women are when it comes to big numbers in the national economy and jobs and earnings and all that sort of stuff. Just imagine somebody being able to go do the research, they dot all their I's, and finally their reward for doing all this stuff is to be excoriated publicly and washed out of Harvard. Imagine if that were the case. I mean, it's just lucky that Pinker has such an incredible reputation. I mean, I've never heard a bad thing about the guy, that he can say that sort of stuff and not be crucified. But whatever the case, what am I? I'm just getting off on a thing now. So for the Gillette thing, like I said, it's the internal inconsistencies about what we're talking about. It's like either they're stereotypes and we can't say them and can't just brush an entire gender with them, with the responsibility for them, or we can, and therefore we can do it to the other side as well. So those are my thoughts on that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about related to this, especially when it comes to, whether there's a difference between genders, and you can criticize on that basis who socialized who to be what and all sorts of other stuff. But I'm not going to get into that now. That's just Gillette. Just hopefully these companies get out of the business. They get hit enough. They get out of business of trying to make political statements about all this stuff and just try to stick to making a good product. We'll see. Every company doesn't have to be an engine of social justice. You can just have a razor company. You could have somebody who makes tires. They don't need to take a position on a bunch of political issues. But whatever the case. All right, that's the last coffee. Thank you. Okay, bye.